The poor girl only had $5 tucked inside her purse for the blind date. The single dad CEO at the next table noticed her quiet struggle and couldn't look away. The restaurant hummed with the low chatter of couples sharing weeknight meals, the clink of glasses ringing softly, silverware brushing porcelain in steady rhythm. Candlelight glowed from each table, casting warm golden halos against polished wood and navy blue linens. It wasn't the city's fanciest place, but for Haley, it felt like stepping into a world she had only imagined. She pushed the door open cautiously, the bell above chiming as if to announce her arrival louder than she wanted. Her fingers smoothed down the sides of her simple dress. An old pearl-colored piece fitted neatly at the waist, its fabric beginning to show threads at the seams. Once her mother's, it had seen only one special occasion before, her college graduation. Tonight, it was her shield, her quiet declaration of hope. Earlier in her tiny apartment, she had curled her blonde hair with shaky hands, applied a touch of makeup she could barely afford, and painted her lips a tender pink. But no paint could mask her nerves. The hostess greeted her with a kind smile. "Reservation for Haley?" she managed, her voice stronger than her trembling heart. "This way," she followed, careful in her steps, until they reached a small table by the window. The soft lamp above seemed to spotlight the space, as if expecting something important to unfold. Haley sat gently, clutching her purse in her lap, knees drawn close. A quick glance at the clock read 6:45 p.m. She was 15 minutes early. Good. She needed a moment to breathe. Maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. Haley sat at the small table near the window, her fingers brushing the edge of the napkin, as though it might steady her racing heart. The restaurant glowed with the kind of gentle light that made everything feel softer, but it did little to calm the nerves that pulsed beneath her skin. Every few seconds her eyes darted toward the entrance, pretending to scan the room casually, though her heart was anything but casual. Aaron, that was his name. They had matched on a dating app. He had seemed kind in his messages, thoughtful even, never pushy, never demanding. Short replies, yes, but sweet. And when he had suggested this restaurant, Haley had hesitated. It was nicer than any place she had been in months, maybe years. But she had said yes. That yes had taken weeks to form, months to gather, years if she was honest with herself. She had not said yes to anyone in what felt like forever. At another table, not too far from hers, a man in a charcoal gray suit stirred his drink slowly. His glass of scotch caught the amber light, the liquid rippling with each small move. Ethan Blake had only just come from a meeting, one of many that filled his days. But tonight the weight of boardrooms and deadlines did not follow him. His eyes, sharp yet softened by something he hadn't felt in a long while, settled on the young woman near the window. He had watched her arrive with that mix of hope and trembling, a sight that reminded him of who he used to be, once upon a time. Minutes passed, 15, then 30. Haley shifted in her seat, her hope thinning with each glance at the clock. She checked her phone again, no new message. She scrolled back to the last one he had sent earlier that afternoon. "Can't wait to see you tonight." The words seemed to glow at her, mocking now, though she tried to smile at them like a child clinging to a scrap of paper. At 7:15 she sent a quick message of her own. "Hey, I'm just checking in." Nothing. Her throat tightened as the seconds bled into minutes. Each time the door opened, she lifted her gaze with a fragile kind of hope, only for her stomach to sink again. At 7:30 she gathered the courage to call. One ring, then voice. The hollow sound of disappointment echoed louder than any clinking glass around her. A server approached gently. "Miss, would you like to go ahead and order something? We're starting to fill up." Haley blinked, startled. "Oh, I'm actually waiting for someone, just a little long." The server nodded, polite, and drifted away. Haley's small purse sat in her lap, and when she opened it she stared at the folded $5 bill inside. Her emergency fund, if she was honest with herself. She had not planned to spend it, not really. Maybe a cup of tea if she absolutely had to. But her heart had held on to the hope that he would come, that they would share a meal, that maybe this night would be the beginning of something new. Then her phone buzzed. Relief surged for a fraction of a second, before it broke like glass when she read the message. "Wow, you actually... I was just messing with you. Sorry, but you're not really my type. Not worth the Uber." Her breath caught, sharp and painful. Another notification followed. "You seem nice, But seriously, you thought I was actually coming?" The words blurred as her eyes burned, though no tears. She forced herself to blink hard, her jaw locking as though it could hold the pain inside. Around her, the world moved on, laughter from couples, servers bustling, glasses clinking, but all of it turned to static in her ears. She gripped the napkin tighter in her hand, refusing to let herself break here, not in front of strangers. Ethan, still seated nearby, noticed the change. He hadn't heard the cruel words on her phone, but he didn't need to. He saw the color drain from her face, saw the way her spine straightened as though it was the only thing holding her together. He knew that look, the quiet devastation, the desperate dignity. Once, long ago, he had worn the same expression when he had waited for someone who never truly arrived. Haley sat frozen, fingers trembling around the napkin. Her eyes stayed dry but glassy, her posture tight, as though she longed to shrink small enough to disappear into the cracks of the floor. She was hungry. He could see it in the way she pressed a hand lightly against her stomach, in the way she had only sipped water since she arrived. But her pride was louder than her hunger. She glanced toward the server's station, calculating how long she could remain invisible before someone politely asked her to leave. Finally, she stood, moving slowly as though each step weighed more than her body could carry. Her purse was already clutched in her hand, her eyes fixed on the door. Just as she turned to leave, a server appeared beside her, balancing a plate of warm pasta and a sparkling glass of lemonade. "Excuse me, miss," the server said with a smile. "Your order." Haley froze. Confusion furrowed her brow. I didn't order anything. "It was taken care of," the server replied. "Someone requested it for you. Your tab has been covered." Haley's breath caught. Her first instinct was suspicion, fear even. Was this another cruel trick? Another stranger playing games at her expense? Then a voice spoke from just behind her, calm and steady. "It's not charity," Ethan said. His tone carried no pity, only a quiet honesty. "It's a reminder. You deserve to eat, even if the world tries to tell you otherwise." Startled, Haley turned. Ethan stood, one hand resting lightly on the back of his chair, his gaze steady but gentle. His expression wasn't mocking or patronizing. It was simply human. Without waiting for an invitation, he pulled out the chair across from hers and sat down. Silence stretched between them for a long moment, but it wasn't awkward. It was almost grounding. Finally, his voice came again, low and certain. "Take care of your stomach before you try to take care of someone else's heart." Haley blinked at him, the words catching her off guard. It wasn't a pickup line, it wasn't condescending. It was true, and no one had ever said something so simple yet so piercing. She glanced down at the plate in front of her, her hands still folded tightly in her lap. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered. "I know," Ethan replied softly. His eyes stayed on her, calm and unshaken. "But I wanted to." Haley hesitated, her fork resting untouched beside the plate. The scent of warm pasta filled the air, mingling with the faint citrus fizz of lemonade. But she kept her hands in her lap. Her body felt like stone, frozen between embarrassment, suspicion, and the faint flicker of relief. Across from her, Ethan leaned back slightly, not pressing, not insisting. His presence was calm, the kind that steadied rather than overwhelmed. He was different from anyone she had ever sat across from. His suit, tailored and expensive, suggested wealth, but his eyes carried no judgment. They were simply watching, waiting, seeing. "You don't know me," Haley said finally, her voice low, almost defensive. "True," Ethan answered without hesitation. "But I saw enough." She frowned faintly. "And what exactly did you see?" He leaned forward just a little, resting his elbows on the table. His voice dropped to something steady, almost intimate. "Someone who showed up, someone who hoped, someone who waited longer than she should have, not because she was desperate, but because she believed. That still matters." Her throat tightened. People had always called her naive, soft, too hopeful for her own good. But this stranger, this man had just called her brave without ever using the word. For a moment she felt something unfamiliar but grounding. Seen. Haley finally reached for the fork, her hand trembling slightly as she twirled a small bite of pasta. The taste was warm, comforting, more real than anything she had eaten in days. Each bite melted some of the heaviness that had threatened to choke her. Ethan didn't speak, didn't hover. He simply sat, sipping his drink and giving her the space to breathe again. When she looked up, he smiled faintly. "I didn't mean to interfere," he said, "but you reminded me of someone I used to be." Her eyes narrowed slightly with curiosity. "And who is that?" He paused, his expression unreadable for a beat before soft. "A guy who thought he needed to be something else to be worth showing up for." Something in his words settled in her chest like a stone dropping into water, steady, rippling outward. She looked at him differently then, not just as a stranger in a suit, but as someone who understood more than he let on. The evening passed quietly after that. Haley ate, slowly but completely, and Ethan remained there, not pushing conversation, not filling the silence with noise, just being present. When the plate was empty, she set her fork down and exhaled as though she had been holding her breath the whole time. He stood first, sliding a small card across the table. No flourish, no pressure. "I come here often," he said. "For coffee, not company." Haley stared at the card, then up at him. Her eyes were still cautious. "Guard." He gave a small nod, one of understanding more than farewell, and then he left. The week that followed moved like a blur of routine. Classes, library shifts, late nights studying. Yet the memory of that evening lingered, threading through her days like a quiet hum she couldn't silence. His words stayed with her, not just the ones he had spoken, but the weight of what he hadn't. It was Thursday morning when fate decided to stir again. Haley pushed open the door to a cozy cafe tucked between the campus library and a bookstore. It wasn't a place she often visited. Her budget rarely allowed for indulgences, but today she needed the Wi-Fi and the comfort of coffee. She fumbled with the coins in her small purse at the counter, calculating whether she could stretch enough for a plain black brew. "Make that too," a voice said smoothly from behind her. She turned, startled to see Ethan seated in the corner. His laptop glowed faintly in front of him, sleeves rolled to his forearms, a calm smile resting easily on his face. The barista nodded, already preparing the drink. Haley blinked. "You remembered my name," she said quietly as he handed her the cup a few moments later. "I remembered your courage," he replied without missing a beat. Name was the easy part. Heat rose in her cheeks as she sat across from him. The morning light spilled through the windows, streaking gold across the table between them. The cafe smelled of cinnamon and roasted beans, inviting yet unpretentious. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the kind that didn't demand words to feel whole. "You work around here?" she asked finally, curiosity edging past her nerves. "Sometimes," he said, nodding. "This place is close to one of our product research partners." "Product research?" She raised a brow slightly, but before she could ask, he leaned back, his smile turning. "You know, I completely botched our last campaign," he admitted. "We tried launching a new toddler snack line, and the slogan ended up sounding like we were encouraging chewing gum for babies. Not exactly the message we wanted out there." Haley let out a small, surprised laugh. "That sounds like something my anatomy professor would hate." Ethan chuckled, shaking his head. "Trust me, a food influencer roasted us online, complete with a meme that went viral. It wasn't our proudest moment, but you learn to laugh or you drown in." She found herself smiling, really smiling, for the first time in weeks. There was no pity in his tone, no arrogance, just humor, humility and the kind of honesty that felt rare. "You'd be better than half the copywriters we hire," he said casually. She raised an eyebrow. "I'm a broke nursing student, not a branding expert." "Exactly," he countered, grinning. "You read people better than the marketers do." The conversation meandered easily after that. Coffee preferences, childhood snacks, the time she had disastrously cut her bangs with safety scissors. He listened, genuinely, never once shifting the focus back to himself unless it was to share something light-hearted. It was effortless. When she stood to leave, she expected him to say something to prolong the moment, but he didn't. He simply smiled, nodded, and let her go. No pressure, no chase, just respect. As Haley stepped out into the sunlight, coffee cup warm in her hand, she realized she was smiling again. Not because someone had rescued her, but because someone had listened. Because for the first time in a long time, she felt like she had been seen not as a burden, but as a choice, and maybe, just maybe that made all the difference. The days rolled by, and though Haley tried to bury herself in books and shifts at the library, Ethan's words and his quiet presence lingered. She hadn't expected to see him again, not really, but life seemed intent on weaving their paths together. One afternoon, she found herself slipping into a modest conference room, where white folding chairs were lined neatly in rows. A bright projector splashed cheerful cartoon vegetables across the screen. A banner on the back table read Blaine Organic. Haley adjusted her cardigan over her nursing scrubs, clutching her notepad. She normally couldn't afford the fee for events like this, but a week earlier Ethan had sent her a text. Thought this might fit with your studies. Fees covered. No pressure. The presentation began. Childhood nutrition, allergen awareness, food safety. Haley listened intently, raising her hand twice, once to ask about preservatives, once to question a labeling system. Both times the presenter paused, surprised at the sharpness of her observation. That's an excellent question, he said warmly, and a very good catch. Haley lowered her hand shyly, cheeks flushed, but she caught a glimpse of Ethan at the back of the room, standing quietly in a navy blazer. His eyes weren't full of pride or ownership. They held something rarer, recognition. Afterward, while others crowded the snack table or handed out resumes, Haley slipped out heading for her sanctuary, the library tucked between office buildings, with its quiet garden view. She pushed open the glass door, not expecting anything unusual, and froze. There was Ethan, standing by the children's corner, holding the hand of a small girl in a yellow sweater dress. He looked up, startled but smiling. "Hey, didn't expect to see you. I just came to return a few books," Haley murmured, lifting the small stack in her arms. Her eyes drifted to the child peeking shyly from behind his leg. "This is Lily," Ethan said softly, his voice gentler than she had ever heard. "My daughter." Haley crouched slightly, offering a warm smile. "Hi, Lily." The little girl blinked up at her, then inched closer, her tiny hand brushing the hem of Haley's cardigan. "She's pretty," Lily whispered. "Not to anyone in particular." Haley chuckled, heart swelling. "And so are you." Lily tilted her head, curious. Then without warning, she leaned closer and inhaled softly near Haley's shoulder. "She smells like mommy," she announced in a small, solemn voice. The air thickened. Ethan's body stiffened, his hand tightening ever so slightly on his daughter's shoulder. His jaw clenched, his eyes flickering with a pain Haley recognized instinctively. Haley stayed perfectly still, her own voice careful, tender. "That's a big compliment," she said gently. "Your mommy must have smelled like kindness." Lily nodded solemnly before darting off toward the picture books. Ethan exhaled, his gaze still unfocused, before turning back to Haley. "She passed 2 years ago," he said quietly. "Lily doesn't usually say things like that." Haley nodded slowly, understanding in her eye. Children remember more with their hearts than their heads. For the first time, Ethan's guarded expression cracked. What looked back at her wasn't a polished CEO, but a father carrying grief too heavy for one man. And in that moment, something shifted between them. Weeks bled into one another, their connection deepening not through grand gestures, but through simple unspoken choices. Haley began stopping by his office, sometimes dropping off notes on his research, sometimes just sitting with a cup of tea while he worked. Her insights, sharp, compassionate, rooted in care, became invaluable to his projects. But more than that, her presence became a quiet rhythm in his life. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, when Ethan's nanny had class or couldn't come, Haley filled the gap. Not as a babysitter, not out of obligation, but because Lily responded to her with ease. She picked her up from daycare, braided her hair before bed, and always without fail, read 2 books at night. Never 1, never 3, 2. And somewhere between bedtime stories and late-night cups of tea, something fragile but undeniable began to grow. Ethan found himself lingering on her laughter, drafting unsent messages about Lily's silly remarks, wanting to share small moments that mattered only because she would understand. One evening, the line between kindness and something more blurred. Lily had a fever, cheeks flushed, eyes heavy. Ethan juggled thermometers and soup, exhaustion wearing him down. At 4:30 there was a soft knock. Haley stood in the doorway, a small canvas bag in her hand. "You didn't sound okay on the phone," she said simply. Inside she knelt by the couch, placing a cool lavender compress against Lily's forehead. The child sighed, melting into her lap. Haley hummed softly, a lullaby so gentle it seemed part of the air itself. Ethan froze. He knew that song. His late wife used to sing it, altered with silly lyrics that always made Lily giggle. He hadn't heard it in years. The sound unraveled him. He sank into the armchair, tears coming before he could stop them, silent and unstoppable. Haley kept humming, her own eyes damp but steady. When the song ended, she whispered, "I didn't know. You couldn't have," he said hoarsely. His hands covered his face. "She used to sing that every night. I thought Lily had forgotten." "Children don't forget love," Haley replied softly.
They just wait to hear it again. The three of them stayed there. One man, one woman, one sleeping child. No labels, no confessions, but something had already begun to take root. The letter came weeks later, heavy with promise, a scholarship, full tuition, pediatric specialization, everything Haley had worked for, prayed for, dared to hope for. Yet when she told Ethan in the park, as Lily chased Bubbles, her chest was tight with fear. "You should go," he said firmly when she confessed. "You think so?" she whispered. "You earn. Loving someone doesn't mean holding them, it means not clipping their wings." The words sank deep, and so she left, not with guilt, not with fear, but with a promise unspoken. Love could survive A year later, Haley returned, stronger, steadier, her nursing badge hanging proudly from her coat. An invitation led her to the rooftop garden of Blake Nutrition Co., where Ethan stood presenting a new product, her first spoon, dedicated to dignity, nourishment, and hope. The packaging bore a silhouette she recognized instantly, a woman cradling a child, spoon in hand. When their eyes met, the noise of the crowd faded. He walked straight to her, pulling a small box from his pocket. No kneeling, no grand declarations, just a simple ring, a quiet vow. "I don't want to save you," he said. "I want to stay, if you'll let me." Her answer was steady, a nod, not from desperation, but from peace. That evening, they returned to the restaurant where it all began. 3 chairs now, one for each of. Lily presented a crayon drawn, 3 figures at a dinner table, smiling beneath a yellow sun. "This is us," Lily said proudly. "Because Mommy Haley likes spaghetti." Haley's breath caught. She reached across the table, touched Ethan's hand, and whispered, "You were never I just needed to believe long enough to wait." And in that moment, under flickering candlelight, the quiet miracle of showing up was enough. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to support soul-stirring stories by hitting that hype button and subscribing to our channel. Every like, every comment, every share helps us create more moving tales, like the girl who showed up with only $5 and found more than she ever expected. Because somewhere out there, someone is still waiting, not just to be noticed, but to be understood, to be loved. Turn on notifications so you never miss the next story that might stay with you forever. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can change everything.